Right, the Strategic Directions Committee meeting. Just a couple of reminders up front. The public meeting will be recorded and published to Council's website about 48 hours after this meeting, and it'll remain up there for about 3 months. So any audio and visual of any persons making a deputation or persons present in the gallery will be recorded during that time. And also just to make sure everybody has checked in with the QR code as they've come in. If you haven't, make your way out just outside the door and make sure you do that. Thank you. A couple of people. If you need any help with that, just sing out. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Members, I'll officially open the meeting. We recognise the land on which we meet as considerable natural and cultural heritage, including thousands of years of traditional ownership by Ghana. Confirmation of the minutes. Members, you've got those. What is your wish? Moved by Councillor Themeliotis and seconded by Mayor Thompson. Any discussion or questions? No, I'll put those. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. There's no adjourned business, no chairperson's report, no presentations and no deputations tonight. So we'll move on to item 7.1, tree canopy and heat mapping results. Are there any updates to this report? No updates to the report. Members, what is your wish? Oh, there is a presentation? Okay, there is a presentation, no worries, thank you.
A bit closer. Is that better? Right. Since we first undertook this mapping in 2016, urban greening has become a big focus for councils around the country. Locally, we joined with 16 other councils and the state government to map tree canopy data across Adelaide for the first time. This year, we've also repeated the mapping that we conducted in 2016 of our urban area, and that included the townships of Wollonga, McLaren Flat and McLaren Vale. Our urban mapping gives us information at a finer scale, which is more useful in influencing our operations, but at the same time, it's good to be able to compare our council region as a whole to the rest of Metro Adelaide. So we know that 30% cover is considered a desirable level of cover for cooling, wellbeing, amenity, and our tree cover for our whole region was over 25%. The only councils in Adelaide that met the 30% cover was Tea Tree Gully, Burnside and Mitcham. So a quick recap, we established urban forest targets as a council because of the value trees provide in softening our built environment, creating microclimates for cooling, wind protection and providing habitat. Our targets are based on the 2016 mapping baseline and they also reflect state government policy. They apply to our urban area only and they cover all land ownership types. Now trees obviously take a long time to grow and a 20% increase in cover, although it is measurable, isn't very relatable. So we also worked out how many trees we could plant on council land to help us towards our target, and that's how we landed on 100,000 trees. So how are we doing? Well, there's been a huge increase in planting on council land and our 100,000 tree target is on track. Our planting happens through our Natural Areas program, our Suburb Improvement program, and when we upgrade roads and footpaths. Our council nurseries become critical to the greening program. The stocks actually become harder to get in Adelaide because there's such a focus on greening in councils. And this year we received $200,000 for a Greener Neighbourhoods grant, and we actually wouldn't have been able to fulfil it without our nursery. It also enables us to grow specialised Indigenous plants from seed. We plant around 50,000 understory plants through our revegetation program each year. So we report on our annual tree planting through the annual report. Our urban green cover target is also on track. Urban green cover is basically a term that means all vegetation, and it's a term that state government uses. So if we meet our 20% increase, which I'm quite confident we will be at 30% vegetation cover in our urban area. Tree cover is a bit more of a mixed story. Our tree cover's gone down slightly since 2016. We do start from a fairly low base in our urban area of nearly 13%. But as you can imagine, that's quite variable between suburbs based on how recently they were developed and also their topography. For this round of mapping, we've also been able to analyse tree cover based on ownership, which has been really useful. On council land, our tree cover has reduced by just over 14 hectares since 2016. This would seem quite counterintuitive given what I've just told you about how many trees we're planting. But a key thing to note is that the definition of a tree for mapping purposes starts at 3 metres high. So around half our trees are planted as tube stock, which are about that big. And they're in our re-veg program in our creeks and reserves. And for this program, we begin by removing invasive weeds such as olive, ash, willows and poplar. So we actually begin by removing tree cover. An example of this is the image on the right, and that's a creek line in Ranella where we've started by removing invasive weeds. When we upgrade a road or footpath, we also remove trees that are in poor health. We then go through and plant an avenue of advanced trees, and they're around 1.5 metres high. So again, these are currently getting picked up in the mapping as shrubs. The private land has actually had a small gain in canopy cover. When compared with private land across Adelaide, our tree cover on private land is quite low by comparison. It's around half. Our makeup is though quite different compared to other urban councils in that where we have greenfield developments, often our sites were previously agricultural land, and these areas will actually become greener as they develop. By how much will depend on the space that's allowed in the design for trees on both public and private land. So overall, there has been a net gain of tree cover across private land in the last 4 years, with many suburbs gaining in cover through tree growth. At the same time, we've been able to map the loss of large mature trees in our urban area and found that 89 hectares of large trees have been lost on private land in the last 4 years. So a bit more about what we know about the loss of large trees and what we don't know. Of the large trees that have been lost, we can't tell from the mapping how many have died of natural causes or were removed. It's also worth remembering that this period included 2016, which had an incredible number of storm days. And just for example, we lost 1,200 trees on council land alone that year. The only role council has in trees on private land is if they're defined as regulated and significant trees under the Development Act. But any other tree can be removed on private land without our knowledge. We don't have a role. What we do know is that only some of this loss can be explained by development. In the last 4 years, we've received 400 development approvals that included a request to remove 1 or more trees. Only 57 of these were in relation to building a house or another building, such as a shed. The majority were requested for other reasons, such as poor health, risk, etc. So to recap, overall on private land, there's been a net growth of new canopy that has been greater than the area of large mature trees lost. So just moving on to the thermal imagery. This was taken on a day of nearly 35 degrees at Noarlunga Centre, and you can look it up for yourself on our website and you can enter your property address. The cooling effect of vegetation is clearly visible across the city when you look at the mapping, as is irrigated grass and water bodies. It's interesting to see how much cooler even the dry swales that collect water are. The hotter areas are unshaded hard surfaces. Dry dead grass and vegetation actually comes up as the hottest, with exposed soil and artificial turf as well. Bitumen and concrete are somewhere in between the two extremes, but they both retain their heat for much longer at night. So on the left, it's an area of Seaford Road at the top. And you can see on the bottom left, just the difference between the unirrigated oval to the bottom right and the irrigated oval. It's quite a stark difference, and the water bodies to the left. To the right is the Seaford Soccer Club at Port Noarlunga South, where you've got a combination of irrigated turf and artificial turf. So this is really popular with the community, the heat mapping. And it's also, we use it to prioritise our planting through the Suburb Improvement Program, and also when applying for grants and open space upgrades. So just to finish off, the next steps for us are really to continue doing what we're doing with our tree planting program. There's quite a lot of data still to synthesise in our operations, so we'll review based on what we now know. Definitely we'll remeasure. I really feel like the collaborative approach across Adelaide is the way to go, both for consistency and efficiency. And we'll continue to work with Green Adelaide and Resilient South on tree campaigns, so that we really want to make sure that people understand the value of trees, even small trees, in smaller spaces. I'll leave it there.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that presentation, Jenny. Members, questions? Councillor Brown.
Thank you. With regards to this, let's see the first one. How can we, trying to diplomatically do this, the urban infill, we're losing one house and it's going into 6 flats with no trees and just a driveway that's called open space into the carports. How better can we improve these developments with having greening and heat mapping involved in this, to try and encourage developers to be a little more aware of the impacts it has and the social vulnerability it has on these properties that are probably targeted for low socioeconomic areas?
Through you, Chair. Thank you for the question, Councillor Brown. Well, you're very familiar with the Development Plan and the Development Act, and as was just touched on, regulated and significant trees are where Council's control lies in the development assessment process. And as also noted, we don't have any control over how trees are removed that aren't considered to be regulated or significant, unless, of course, they're protected by an LMA or some other legal instrument. We are advocating for additional greening requirements in the Planning and Design Code. What's in there has actually been watered down to what we've currently got in the development plan. So there'll be a submission coming to Council next week, where that will be part of our draft submission for consideration as well.
So what's coming next week will be seen to be viewing tree canopy and heat mapping and social vulnerability of these impacts. There'll be a change?
Through the Chair, those considerations are not necessarily part of a development assessment. It relates to the size of the tree, large trees only. The Native Vegetation Council potentially has a role to play in some circumstances. Those other considerations are things that we look at in a general sense for, I guess, trends and the like, but not in particular individual development applications.
So with regards to these developments, and it's basically going to fall on the lap of the government, what can we do? It's not just going to affect the city of Onkaparinga, it's going to affect wherever there is infill. And the long-term effect is not only the heat, it's the social vulnerability of some of the developments that are being put in. How are we going to work this with the government? Is there any plans with the councils through the LGA or?
Excuse me, through the chair, as I just alluded to, there is a submission coming to council next week with a draft submission on the code where we do specifically identify that some of the work that we managed to get included in the development plan about 1 tree per allotment, deep soil zones and the like, the work that we did a few years ago with all the residential areas that was quite controversial at the time, some of those wins have been watered down in the draft code. It was our understanding at the time that that work was to influence the code and be included in a statewide code. That hasn't been completely done or transferred or translated into the new code, so that'll be part of the draft submission that we're proposing. The state government has also recently acknowledged that the watering down of the regulated and significant tree legislation in 2011 has significantly impacted the trees in South Australia. They're aware of that. I'm not aware particularly of any tightening controls that they're proposing at this point in time, but I know it is continuing to be an issue for local government, and I guess advocacy would be the way to do that, and a starting point would be through the code submission.
Okay, and while I've got you there, Renee, leafy car parks. When we have developments, in the past we've encouraged leafy car parks. Are we still doing that, and why have we got such barren car parks?
Thank you, Councillor Brown. If you could just direct the questions through the chair.
Through the chair, I can't talk specifics, but quite often it depends on the size of the allotment or the car park, circulation, safety as well, in terms of having vehicles parking under trees, depends what type of tree it is as well. There might be other protection mechanisms, such as canopy, actual hard canopy covers instead of trees. So if there's a specific example, I can talk to that, but in a broad sense, it is generally encouraged, but it's case by case.
Okay.
Thanks, Councillor Brown. Councillor de Graaf. Well, there's Councillor Brown. There are a number of other people who've got questions. You've had 4 questions. If you want to ask some more, maybe just hit your button again and I'll pop you at the end. Thank you. Councillor de Graaf.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to move the motion, but I would like to add a number 3 in. Before I do that, though, I would like to ask a question, which is advice on my number 3.
Okay,
So can I ask a question first, please?
Ask a question, yes,
Yeah,
go ahead.
Thank you. So if I put this in as number 3, wondering if staff could comment on this, please. That stricter protocols on the removing of regulated trees on private land be investigated, with a report to come back to the March SDC meeting.
Thanks, Councillor de Graaf. Thanks, Renee.
Through the chair, can I just seek to clarify what you mean by protocol?
Well, to do that, I would need to explain why. It's because in that report, it talks about that council had 480 planning applications and only 80 of those were refused for removing trees from the backyards. So something that makes that harder, basically. So stricter protocols, and that would be left up to staff to investigate and to come back with a report.
Through the chair, those 400 DAs were over a 4-year period. We have 3,500 DAs a year, so that is quite a small proportion of applications when you actually consider it over a 4-year period. Excuse me, as I alluded to before, the state government, excuse me, I don't have COVID, has acknowledged publicly that the watering down of the legislation in 2011 has resulted in quite a few more trees being removed. And that was mainly to do with the girth of the tree measurement, which they increased, which means that only the very large trees in Adelaide are protected.
Okay, well, just to add on to my question then, can you see this of benefit if I was to move this number 3 here to allow staff to go off and look at other protocols to make it harder, even harder on top of whatever the state is proposing, council's own regulations to make that more difficult?
Councillor de Graaf, I might just get you to repeat that third motion, please.
Yes, okay, number 3. Okay, that stricter protocols on the removing of regulated trees on private land be investigated with a report to come back to the March SDC.
Through the chair, excuse me, we can revisit the watering down of the legislation back in 2011. Which will offer some additional protections, but again, I don't think that's entirely what you're looking to achieve. We can also just investigate what other states also do as well, what they consider to be important trees, what definitions there are. Yeah, so I guess we can just, that's certainly not a problem, and we can do that.
All right, well, thank you, Renee. I would like to move that as written then, if that's okay. And then speak to that, if that's all right.
Let's go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I did read through the Conservation Council's report that was attached as a link to these other reports in here, and it mainly talks about one of the main issues that's happened is with regards to mum and dad developers who are, clearing so just a standard block and then putting 2 to 3 houses on there where there was one before, and so then the trees are being removed as well. And I think the report that we've just heard and everything else that's in here as well does pretty much reflect that. The report from the Conservation Council as well was just basically saying that there's a lot of poor planning involved that has contributed to the removal of all of the trees. So I would really hope that with this addition of the number 3 that council might be able to look at some ways to make it harder for people to remove the trees from the suburban blocks and just try to build around them, because I asked these questions a few weeks ago, and it was like about $40, I believe, on if you have a concession card and you want to remove either a regulated tree or a significant tree. And so, I mean, it's pretty easy to chop down these big, beautiful, amazing trees, and we can see that from all the reports. So I think everything else is pretty much straightforward. So I'd ask that people might support the motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor de Graaf. Do I have a seconder for that motion? If you could just raise your hand if you are going to second that motion. Councillor Brown, do you wish to speak? Yeah, Councillor Brown.
A significant amount of trees removed in the probably last 9 or 10 years. It obviously is the watering down and the 2-week gap where Old Ranella car park just got all the trees totally removed, and that's just an example of developers. So if there is some other way of us addressing some of these trees, the removal of the trees, I think we need to be mindful of what we're spending in one hand of doing the tree canopy and the heat mapping. We need to actually support it in retaining mature species. It takes a long time for a seedling to grow to maturity. So we can only look at the councils that are Burnside Council, which doesn't have the urban area that we have. They have a significant amount of trees. City of Mitcham probably doesn't have the rural that we have, but they have a significant amount of trees. So I think there's room for the City of Onkaparinga to likely improve its percentage.
Thanks, Councillor Brown. Councillor Bray.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as far as debate goes on this, I mean, I do have a little bit of sympathy for both sides, partly from personal experience, because my insurer has required that I modify the tree canopy a bit and ultimately substitute some European trees. So I guess there are two sides to it. My understanding is, though, that the protocols are state government rather than local government. So the number 3 that's there would have to end up, if it's going to have any value, as some kind of lobbying of the state government. I believe we've actually got something in hand on that matter right now. And finally, in relation to Councillor Brown's comments, I think the problem we've got in South Australia is our 3 levels of government, where we have local government, the state government and the property council. And I think we probably need to modify that in some way. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bray. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Jenny. Nice to see you again. Thank you for the report. I enjoyed reading it. Can I just ask you, mine's just a question in relation to the urban heat island effect. And just based on your knowledge and experience, is there academic research that's recorded out there that actually shows the impact that that has on the health and well-being of people who live in urban heat island affected developments? Is there a pattern of what ailments or illnesses or cultural impact it has on people?
Through the chair. Probably the closest we have is in relation to actual heat waves. So heat waves actually kill more people than any other natural disaster in Australia. And what they find is that the presentation to hospital in areas of high heat is higher. Also related to that is, of course, the housing quality. And also social disadvantage. So if you're in a good sealed house with an air conditioner, you're not going to suffer. If you're in a very poor quality house with no air conditioning, you're going to feel it.
So just a follow-up question. So residents living in a 300 square metre, on a 300 square metre block of land in a small house where there isn't any tree canopy, or there isn't an ability to get tree canopy, so their health is significantly affected by living in those sorts of circumstances. Is that your view?
I couldn't comment on a correlation with health in that circumstance, but I would say they'll be leaning on their air conditioning more.
Councillor Olsen.
Thank you, Mayor. Not Mayor, Chair. I have some questions. So why are we looking at this social vulnerability in this?
Just clarify, why are we or why aren't we?
Yeah, so no, we are. Well, it says in dot point 2 that, you know, this is all about tree canopy, yet we're using a social vulnerability index to determine where we plant the trees. I thought it was all about where there are no trees.
Through the chair, that particularly has applied to the suburb improvement program. So that was reviewed and came to council in 2019. And we have lots of areas in council to plant, so we do need to prioritise. So we chose 3 criteria: existing tree canopy, heat, and also social disadvantage. So they're all applied together.
My understanding of the suburb improvement program was more about the infrastructure, the age of the infrastructure and the renewal of that, gutters, footpaths, etc., not social vulnerability.
Yeah, the suburb improvement program works in those areas that have those conditions, but the next layer, I guess, of prioritisation is the trees, the heat and the social disadvantage. So it is only working in those older suburbs that have older infrastructure to begin with.
That's what I said, but it's not necessarily, it might be a correlation perhaps that those, but it's not identifying social vulnerable suburbs for the suburb improvement program. It's the age of the infrastructure, the quality of the infrastructure, the condition of the infrastructure that's triggering that, not some other index of social vulnerability.
Through the chair, yeah, I may not have explained that well. So that the age of the infrastructure is the trigger for the suburb improvement program to go in at all. But once we've decided on those suburbs that do need that upgrade, then we further prioritise based on those indicators.
For trees?
For trees, that's right.
On social vulnerability?
That's one of 3 indicators, yes.
Why?
Well, because we feel that, oh yeah, sure.
So through the chair, the projects team led the more recent review of the suburb improvement program. So as a part of that, the new criteria did shift away from the focus on our older, more established areas towards more of the criteria and drivers that are listed up here today. The CFA index introduction of the social vulnerability was around the likelihood that people in those areas have lower car ownership and more likely also to walk to pedestrian generated areas within their local area. So that might be to local shops, to local bus stops, to the school nearby. And therefore there's a feeling that those areas should be prioritised in our tree planting to provide, I guess, a more suitable, aesthetically pleasing, shaded area for them to be able to walk and travel between their home and nearby attractions.
Thank you. I understand that answer. Thank you. And so also on number 1, is that what we're saying our targets are to, or is that, I mean, because it sort of says this is what's happened from 2016 to 2020, but it's talking about targets and by 2045 and planting 100,000 trees. I'm a little bit confused. Is that what's actually happened, or is that what we're trying to achieve?
They are our existing endorsed targets. So they are what we are trying to achieve. They were endorsed in 2017. Oh, okay. So yeah, where it says target and then equals 2.7% increase, that's what's actually occurred since 2016, since the last mapping.
So where are we going to plant 100,000 trees in 20 years? From when to when is that intended to so I'm not understanding what in this motion we're actually agreeing to do, and what we're approving staff to go away. How many trees am I approving, and does it fit within the budget, and will it achieve 30% target in whatever the timeframe was?
Okay, so really it's that is a noting resolution around the progress against our existing targets. So there's no new work being approved.
Are you still not clear, Councillor Olsen?
Well, to me, I'm not clear in that number 1 what I'm actually. It's a mixture of a target in the future and what's happened in 4 years, but it's not clear to anyone who's reading that motion what it is that's talking about, because even I didn't understand and I read the report.
Yeah, maybe if you just go that the first part is the resolution that was made at the last meeting, and that this meeting note the following changes, and I guess that maybe it's not changes, maybe it's reporting on. So 2.7% increase in the urban green cover, and then 0.11 increase in urban tree canopy and 35,000 trees planted. But it doesn't actually change the target that was set back in 2016. It's just for noting.
Okay.
Still not clear?
Well, I understand what you're saying, but no, I don't think that that's a clear, clearly written motion. So.
All right, no worries. Thank you. Is
so
that the end of your questions, or
maybe I'll debate.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, I'm pleased to hear our Manager of Planning talk about improving the Development Act and the tightening around those controls. But I don't actually think it's just those regulations, because I sat in on a council assessment panel in the gallery a few months ago, hearing a hotel development in McLaren Vale, and part of that was the removal of a significant tree in a car park to offset where this motel was going. Well, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, that council assessment panel didn't, and our development report didn't try very hard to save that tree. There were options around saving that tree. That's a significant tree in the heart of McLaren Vale, and there was really no real stringent or look at the alternatives. It was very to the side, and the hotel got approved, which no problems. But this significant tree, cars could park around this tree. It could have been saved. It was this huge, significant tree. So whilst it's great, we might lobby to the state government for some tighter Development Act controls, I think in our own house, we need to get in order for putting back a little bit more pressure on these types of things. I understand not everything, and some are health of trees and all that, and so that's fine. But where we have development options, then these should be pushed a little bit harder from within, I believe. So I still don't like how this is written. So I probably won't support it because I don't like the way it's written. But overall, it's a good thing. Improving the tree canopy and the vegetation is great. So I don't have a problem with where it's moving, but I just don't like the way this is written. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Olsen. Councillor Peet.
Well, thank you, Chair. Just a question in relation and following up in reference to Seaford Meadows development and perhaps our proposed strategic Celix strategic plan. In reference to the tree canopy strategy and the suburb improvement program, can council influence developers with their planting of verges and open spaces which council will inherit?
Through the chair, yes, Councillor Peet, we certainly can. That is one thing that we certainly do have control over, is what types of trees are planted, where they are planted, and at what stage they are to be planted. On our council verges, I'm referring to, not on private land.
And in open spaces that we'll inherit in time.
That's correct.
And we'll attempt to obviously fulfil our tree canopy strategy in that.
Yes, obviously understanding what parts of the open space will be needed for playgrounds and the like, and obviously safety issues there. So all of those are taken into consideration about what types of trees are planted and where they're planted in those open space environments. From a safety perspective as well, we're very familiar with an incident recently where a significant tree dropped a limb on a car that was driving past that had a catastrophic outcome. So those sorts of things are things that are part of our consideration as well, in where trees are planted and what species.
Excellent, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Peet. Councillor Jamieson.
Yeah, look, Renee's standing there, that's good. So basically, look, within the city of, within Christie's Beach and Port Noarlunga, which are medium density and targeted infill areas. The trend, and I really look forward to when we change the development plan. The trend is that the 900 square metre blocks are divided into 2, 3 or 6 dwellings, you know, and it seems to me that looking at the ones that are 2 and 3 dwellings, there is a reluctance to plant a tree because those dwellings are quite large coming back. So there doesn't seem to be trees growing in those very still small backyards. So I think if we're going to have this canopy, and I put this to the officer, are you considering requiring people to actually put trees in their small backyards? That's the first question, because I think that's the only answer.
Excuse me, through the chair. I might just start off by my own personal example. I live on a 254 square metre block, and I have 11 trees out the back that are as high as my 2-storey dwelling. They're not significant in terms of the width of the circumference of the trees, but they are significant in terms of their height. And when you look at the near map and so on, you can see that I'm one of the only blocks, and I'm not the smallest either, that contributes to trees in that environment. It can be done. It's on tree selection, the type of tree. As to how we can make applicants or developers do that, it's really trying to sell the idea that it adds value to their development. That's really the way that we're going to be able to win this, is by showing that greenery actually increases the value of their development, and therefore that would be the encouragement. I don't think, well, this is my personal opinion, legislatively there's always ways for that to be changed by the incumbent government, or assessed in different ways by different councils, or through whatever the legal processes are. But if you can try and convince the industry that it's to their financial benefit, their hip pocket, that I think will get the most gains.
The second question, if I could, is look, I thought that when we changed the development plan, we got rid of the 6 flat type units per dwelling, and Councillor Brown's referred to one in Davis Street, which is next to a similar sort of one. What is the square meterage of these actual dwellings? You know, there's six in a 900 square metre block, is that roughly for our area?
Through the chair, that's a bit hard to answer without actually having a look at the property and looking at the approvals. As you know, and as I did refer to before, we did significant work with the community a number of years ago in reducing the area that was available for infill development, and that has significantly impacted. We've seen a lot fewer applications for infill development. That may have coincided with a reduction in the market, but it has put the market on notice, I guess, that what was accepted previously is not accepted now. So we have seen significantly better outcomes than what was previously under the old development plan from a few years ago. So from our perspective, we're seeing significantly improved outcomes, whether you're referring to an approval that was given before the new development plan came into place. I'm not certain.
No, I was aware of what was before, and I thought that we actually tidied it up so that the six units on a 900 square metre block. I mean, it's all hard surfaces.
Councillor Jamieson, I might just interrupt there, and I think we kind of need to pull it back to the issue around tree canopy and not so much the development plan itself and the changes for buildings. Okay. So do you have any other questions or debate?
No, I still think that the canopy could be improved in where it's really needed.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Jamieson. Councillor Thameli-Otis.
There's just some questions just in relation to point 3. So it was mentioned that over the 4-year period, a certain number of trees were removed. Can I get an idea of some of the reasons why they were approved for removal? Was it all just developments?
Through the chair, as suggested in the report here, it can be for a various number of reasons. Sometimes it's because the tree was planted back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and it's starting to grow or through the house and has damaged it significantly. The legislation allows trees to be removed that are within 10 metres of a dwelling to prevent damage to infrastructure or buildings of significant value. There are also the ability in the high bushfire areas for just clearing of any vegetation within 20 metres of a dwelling as a bushfire safety response. From a professional perspective, I see that as a real potential area that can be subject to abuse if it's not enforced properly, but if it's not considered properly by the landowners and developers in the area when they do put in applications. Quite often some of them are trees on council's verge, which are either inappropriate species, are sick, or somewhere where a development is going in and that's the best place for the new driveway or whatever it might be, and then replacement tree will be placed somewhere else along the verge. So it could be for a variety of reasons.
Perfect. And just one other question. So when those applications come through, they're obviously treated case by case basis. Perfect. Could I just debate really quickly? Councillors, through the chair, I think it's very easy to put in option 3, but at this time I can't support this motion because of option 3. So in my ward, we are we're a bushfire prone area. We have a lot of trees, and Councillor Eaton and I have been called out to a number of properties, and these are properties that have been there for a number of years, and residents have had trees that are completely destroying their properties. These are pensioners who are at their wits, and we nearly had one in tears in their kitchen over this tree that was completely destroying their property. So I think it's very easy to just put that in and expect change to happen. But in my ward, things should be done at a case-by-case basis, and there is times where trees do need to be removed. So at this stage, I will not be supporting this motion purely based on option 3.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, questions only.
On this point of clarification, I've lived in the rural area. I've had large rural areas. The legislation is 20 metres from the house. You may remove it. So it's not an issue. It's legislated.
Thank you. That's debate, but thank you, Councillor. Mayor Thompson.
I just wanted to, had a question, just to clarify what this actually means, point 3. Does it mean that is the report so that we can then have a position to put forward to the design code updates, or is this for some kind of internal protocol? And do we even have the power to have internal protocols that go against legislation? Because I just want to clarify that, Councillor Bray, I think you're referring to the motion that I moved recently, which was seeking support from our council to support a campaign from metropolitan councils that are doing exactly this. So, and you all supported it. So there's a handful of metropolitan councils who have written to Vicky Chapman. She spoke to this at the LGA AGM, which I mentioned at the last council meeting, and has committed to looking at this and taking a stronger approach. So I know that she is actually working with some of the councils like Mitcham, who is driving this, to try and do exactly that. That is to strengthen, the rules around removing these trees off private land. That's exactly what that is about. So I'm wanting to clarify if point 3 is for something different than that.
Thanks, Mayor Thompson. I'll put that to the mover.
Thank you, Mayor. That's a really good point. I actually would prefer if I could change that word from stricter to better, and because that would cover.
Would you like to respond to the question first, maybe?
Yeah.
Just to clarify what that is.
Yes.
Thank
well,
you.
I think that is responding to it, and the reason why is because it would go off to the staff to think about ways that the things that Councillor Olsen said, in particular that I identified with, and Councillor Brown, could be considered, so that we could have an education campaign that's selling people on the reasons why they should be, that the trees can be kept, and that's actually a benefit for them. Or advocacy to the state. It could be a number of different things. The idea is to give it to the staff to consider these things and empower them to do that. There needs to be something stronger done, in my view.
Thanks, Councillor de Graaf.
Can I change the wording on there from stricter to better?
Sure.
Thank you.
Do I have the leave of the seconder to make that change? All right, I have no further indication of people wishing to speak. So, Councillor de Graaf, you can close debate.
Yes, for sure. I just wanted to say I did really strongly agree with Councillor Olsen's debate. I can't see why that private developers and car parks can't actually build around trees. And I understand that falling limbs are obviously significant, but that can also be mitigated by better management strategies and actually just trimming the trees a bit more rather than actually chopping down the whole tree. So I would really hope that people can support this third option, because I think it enables the staff to have a little bit more control to go off and actually come back and offer some tighter options here. I'm placing a lot of my debate on the Conservation Council's report that was in there, and they were just advocating for better planning. And so the council, for example, we could advocate to the state, as we are already doing, but, you know, just selling the options to the, you know, mum and dad developers, just anyone who's looking at removing these trees. So education campaigns, yeah, just advocacy, better monitoring as well of the trees. So I just also just have a quick question, if that's okay. Okay. Well, I actually wanted to say as well that I wasn't completely clear about where it says that 2.7% increase, because in the motion there it's saying that 20% was our target, but we actually did a 2.7 increase. So I read this to be that we only did 2.7 out of the 20%. And in the number B option, that instead of having 20%, we were 0.11. So we actually went backwards. I think that those things there are the evidence that we need to do something a lot stronger. And that's why I'm hoping option 3 will at least, you know, give us some extra options. So that's all I have to say on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor de Graaf. Members, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? That is lost. Is there a further motion? Councillor Olsen?
Yeah, let's go. Can we rewrite one a little clearer then? And just have, maybe have just say, split that out to say the target remains, or maybe a 4 or a 3. The new 3, which talks about the targets that are remaining, and 1A and B and C just talk about what the changes were from 2016 to 20. Can we somehow have some wordsmithing, please, from those in the know? Sorry?
Yeah, target and then progress 2.7 increase. Yeah, use the word progress.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe you could just leave target there, and then instead of just at the equals, put a full stop at the end of it, and then say 2016-20 progress is something increase, decrease, unless it's another way.
Well, your progress 2.7 increase achieved or something, yeah. And then target, and then progress.
Just a nice little table would have been good, wouldn't it? Yeah. Okay. No, not really. Erin's got something in the wind, and Renee's bringing back some further amendments for the Development Act, so I'm not going to worry about it.
Councillor Olsen, while we're waiting for those words, did you want to debate?
No, there's no real debate.
Okay.
Well, maybe another question. So, is the 100,000 trees we're going to plant going to reach the 30% cover target?
The targets relate to all land ownership. So we can obviously only plant on council land. So we can't say for sure. We will definitely meet 30% on council land, but really it's an aspiration because we can't control private land.
Okay.
Thanks, Councillor Olsen. Is that all?
I don't have any debate.
No, okay, no debate. Thank you.
It.
Do I have a seconder for Councillor Olsen's motion?
I second.
Thank you. Councillor Peat as seconder. Do you wish to debate?
No.
Okay, thank you. All right, you happy with that, Councillor Olsen? The number 3, is that just noting the 2045 targets remain? Something like that? So we'll take out number 3 altogether. All right, thank you, Councillor Olsen.
That's better.
Thank you. Councillor de Graaf.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions that I didn't get to ask before. So was I correct in my assertion about that, where it says the number B was that the canopy was supposed to be increased by 20, or is to be increased by 20% by 2045, but in that 4-year period, it actually went backwards by 0.1%. Is that right?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay, that is a real concern. So, and you're just basically saying it's due to the private development, but you're not completely sure. Have you got any other these new strategies that are going to happen? Are you confident that in the next 4-year period we wouldn't see something like that happening again?
I'm confident that on council land we'll see an increase in tree canopy in the next 4 years because a lot of the trees we're planting will become trees. On private land, I can't predict what will happen, but certainly, you know, there was a net increase in tree cover on private land. We do know that.
All right, thank you. And then the other thing was about what Renee mentioned as well about there being 3,000 applications, development applications in the year. On page 15, it's about 5 paragraphs down, between 2016 and 2020. What I was referring to was that there were 475 development applications, not the other 3,000, just the ones that were asking for these significant trees to be removed. So out of the 475 development applications over that 4 years, so that's 200 a year, 400 were approved. So it's about 80% are being approved. Is there any way that we could make that tougher?
Through the chair, I just remind Councillor de Graaf that there was an article recently in Weekly News where we talked about the number of applications that are refused in the last financial year, I think it was, and it was less than 0.1%. And largely that is because we prevent most applications that are going to be refused from being lodged anyway. So trees that were to be applied for to be removed and we weren't going to approve, we would have said don't bother. So that's not what's reflected in the stats here.
Oh, okay, no worries. All right, well, thank you for clarifying.
Thanks, Councillor de Graaf. No further. Do you wish to close debate or do you want to just... Yep, go for it.
Just another question, just to make sure I've got it right. So that part 1C says 100,000 trees planted in 20 years. So I'm assuming that 2016 was our start of that. So I've put in by 2036. Is that correct? Can I just make sure I've got that time frame right?
Yes, just to confuse you further, it's actually 2037, and that's because the targets were approved in 2017.
Okay, so by 2037, you happy with that? Thank you. That's it.
Okay, so you're completely happy with those wording now. Councillor Pete, you're happy with that wording?
I am.
Thank you, members. I will put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? That motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item 7.2. Waring Street, Port Noarlunga sand replenishment. There's an update to this report. Is there an update? No update to this report? No update? Okay.
Question.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Pete.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question of the officer in relation to the report and the extensive requirement for a number of approvals and permits required. How long does the officer believe this process of acquiring those approvals and permits, how long do they believe this process will take?
Through the chair, estimate about 2 months, I think. Yeah, we are sort of working off a lot of the work that the Coast Protection Board have done already around replenishment, sand replenishment from inland mines that they're doing down on metro beaches. So kind of piggybacking on that. But yeah, I think about 2 months should get us the approvals.
Just a subsequent question, if I may. I agree with the report and the sentiments of the staff who say this is a learning process and an exciting project, and it is, and I think elected members are also quite interested in this. Can there be regular reporting back through, let's say, weekly news or some other means, so then the elected members are kept across the process in relation to applications and permits and discussions with the Ghana representatives?
Through the chair, yeah, certainly. We'll say fortnightly updates.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yep.
Great, thanks, Councillor Pate. Councillor Bray.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick questions. The comment on hydraulic modelling requiring ongoing replenishment. So it would estimate be a 12-monthly thing, once a year, or might it last a couple of years depending on the river flows? What's the history on that?
Through the chair, look, it's going to be, I suppose, yeah, what the flows, how much rainfall we get over winter. Ideally, we would like to see the sand sit there for as long as possible. Yeah, so it's really just going to be, yeah, putting in place and watch and monitor.
So 15,000 per annum is the maximum, but it possibly could be less than that depending on circumstances.
Through the chair, yes, yeah.
Yeah. And my other question was, I'm just curious, the 2-month approval to get the particular sand approved, is that what that's for?
Through the chair, yes, to get it approved, but there's certainly a bit of scientific testing of the sand as well to make sure that.
Well, that's what I was getting at. It
Yeah.
seems to be an awfully long time to look at a sand sample, but still.
Yeah, and sorry, through the chair. Yeah, look, there's a bit of testing to do in regards to the sediment as well as any, I suppose, the organic content within the sand. So there's a whole series of things. We just need to be sure that everything's right in place.
It's still the same sand sample though, so we're still.
Through chair, yeah. Look, some sand comes out cleaner than others, depending on what mine that you're at. It is washed sand, but some, yeah, depending on, yeah, the level of organic matter within that sand. So one sand could be cleaner than the other in regards to that side.
But we're still looking at sand samples, and we're still taking 2 months to do it.
It's not us. It's not us.
Oh, okay.
Through the chair, just to clarify, we're not actually doing the samples. So I think you can see on page 28 near the bottom that fact that we have to get approvals from the Coast Protection Board and the Environment Protection Authority. So
my comment wasn't about us, it was about somebody's taking an awfully long time. Yeah.
Correct.
Thank you, Councillor Bray. Councillor McMahon.
Thank you. Just got a couple of questions. Through the chair, the proposed Waring Street project that we are all aware of at the moment, I remember some of the early plans showing that like a new sea wall there or revetment could be structured in a way to better retain sand in that location. Is that correct?
Through the chair. Yes, that's correct. Yeah, as far as I'm aware, the new concepts have looked into perhaps moving back further inland to try and create a beach area there to allow the flows to sort of flow past and not actually impact the sand in that little embayment.
Yeah.
Not sure whether it's being put out in front.
Thank you. And just secondly, the hydraulic modelling for the sand replenishment. So when the sand, how long the sand lasts, is it fair to say that it's the winter months that have the most damage to sand loss?
Through the chair, it would be the high rainflow. So any inland flows would be the one that impacts beach more so. Tidal flows will to a point, but it tends to be more of a bathtub type effect on the area from tidal flows than the rain or inland flows.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Jamieson.
A couple of questions. Did we seek some advice from the hydrologist about how long the sand will remain on the site?
Through the chair, we did speak to them as part of the report, but they do talk about the sand and the ability for the sand to stay where it is at the moment in the past investigations that we've done, or the investigation we've done as part of the Waring Street project. And they do state that it won't stay for very long, and it will erode away when it does rain and the high flows. So
okay, the second question, if I may, a quick one. The old concrete path we put in just to head further towards Southport Beach, can we clean that area up? In other words, get rid of that old concrete path that's undermined and get that out of there, and that might make it a little bit safer for the kids and that to go down that end.
Through the chair, I believe that's already in progress.
Is it?
Yeah,
cool.
We're looking at replacing the broken concrete with some sandbags.
Don't replace
tiles.
it, take it away.
Yeah. This sand will cover it as well. We're looking at covering all that up, so it's a nice sandy walking path.
No worries, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Jamieson. Councillor Brown. Councillor Brown?
Oh, I thought you said Bray. I played in the sand there as a child, so it sort of had me a bit gobsmacked when I go as an adult. There's no sand there. Was all of this regulations then, or has this just come about in the last 20 years, different regulations of different sand? Because I think Noarlunga Council put sand there, obviously, because I played in it. I swam in the water. Is it a different regulation now that we have to go to all of this, where we've get permission from the, obviously from the State Commission, the Marine Park, and then we've got to test the compatibility of the sand in the area and that it's clear of contaminants and foreign material, and just has me a bit gobsmacked. It was sand there before. Is this new?
Through the chair, yes, it is new. We're bringing in foreign sand from an inland mine to the estuarine environment. So yeah, everything needs to be dotted and crossed to make sure that the sand is appropriate for the location.
So was the sand that used to be there a problem?
No, that's a natural. That was part of the natural environment. Was the sand there? look, I suppose the sand or the river system, estuaries, beaches, they replenish themselves. They erode and recrete sand over time. But back in the day, the dune system down there was heavily eroded from, I suppose, all the sandboarding and things used to go on back in the day. And so it did clog up the estuary, and there was a big program back in that time to dredge the river and sand drift fence to rebuild the dunes, and then they vegetated quite heavily. And yes, the vegetation's holding it all together quite well, and that's essentially why there's a lot of sand replenishing that section of beach at this stage.
So in doing this, will we able to monitor impacts that why if the sand does remove or?
Yes, yeah, that's probably a key part of this. It is trial, and we need to get some good data out of it.
Thanks, Councillor Brown. Mayor Thompson?
Just a quick question. I just wanted to clarify how long it takes. Like, is it just a couple of hours to go and dump the sand down there, or is the beach going to be out of action for a week? Or
through the chair, it'd probably take about a day. Yeah, just there's about 10 truckloads, and then just spreading it. Yeah.
So it would just be that, because it's only area 1 that you're proposing to do. So it will just be that area that'll be out of action for the day. And
through the chair, no, it's area 1 and area 2.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, that the end of your question?
Yep, that's fine.
Thank you. Councillor Olsen.
When is the Waring Street project, or what is the status of that project, and when is that looking to be delivered?
I'm not sure. No.
Bill still got to be in council then.
Yeah. Through the chair, there will be a report to the next council meeting. Council will remember that you asked me to undertake a review of the project, which I've completed the report today. So paper's just being finalised, and it'll be on the agenda for the next council meeting.
No sneak preview on that, is whether it's moving forward or not?
Well, with respect, Councillor Olsen, that's not my decision.
Fair cool. So have we ever dumped sand in this location before?
Through the chair, no.
So in all the time that has been there as a river, sand has come and sand has gone, based on the seasons and all the rest of it. Would that be fair to say? Just like a beach, sand builds up, sand gets washed away. Would that be a fair statement?
Through the chair, the sand did come, but it came obviously off the dunes. The system is that the river takes the sand out to the ocean and blows back up onto the dunes and then finds its way back down in the river again. Yeah.
Okay. Could I move a motion, please?
Yes, go ahead.
So 2 would read that council not approve the supply and installation of 400 tonnes of sand at this point in time, and review the need when the Waring Street project is delivered.
Thank you, Councillor Olsen. Do you wish to speak to that motion?
Look, this river's been there for eternity, and the sand comes and goes. I rode my push bike past there on Thursday morning. We must have had such a high tide. The water was up to that, all the rocks. It was up to the fence line in those dunes. So any sand we put in there now is potentially just washed away with the next high tide. And, you know, we're not compacting this sand. We're just dropping the sand in there and spreading it around, it's $15,000 just to dump a whole heap of sand, which in my opinion will just get washed away. Now, I don't see that as very good value for money when we hear there's a report coming in the next month on the Waring Street project. Now, may go ahead, may not go ahead. And I guess if it doesn't, then perhaps we can review this decision then. But why would we be going dumping sand right now for $15,000 out of some emergency account when we're looking at developing the entire area? And if we're going to change that, we looked at increasing the beach size. Well, maybe at that point in time, it's worthy dumping some sand and see if we can hold that there. But right at the moment, I just don't see, you know, this came to us through a notice of motion, and I don't know which elected member put that forward. This was not something that came from staff. It was a notice of motion. And I don't believe that this is the time frame to do it. Let's hear about where the Waring Street project's at in the next report. Make a decision then, because it makes a lot more sense to dump some sand for $15,000 when we do the project. Now, if it doesn't go ahead, then I'm quite happy to maybe relook at it again if that's the case. But right now, I don't believe we should be doing it. I think it's a waste of money. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Olsen. Councillor Jamieson, are you wishing to second this?
No, I just got to...
That's right. I might just get a seconder first. Is there a seconder? Councillor McMahon, do you wish to speak? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, the reason I was asking the question in relation to winter and sand retention, reading the report, this $15,000 to bring the sand in now wouldn't come in until late February. By then, the best part of summer is over, and we're going to start looking towards that winter season where the sand really could dissipate quickly. You look on top of that, as Councillor Olsen is saying, that we are supposed to be addressing this Waring Street issue. I just think the timing around it now, I'm not against the idea of putting sand there whatsoever. I just think the timing of it now is a little bit counterintuitive, and I fully support Councillor Olsen with this motion.
Thanks, Councillor McMahon. Councillor Jamieson.
Look, I'm actually an advisory member of the Coast Protection Board. It's just to advise Councillor de Graaf. She sent a couple of emails. So I'll declare a perceived interest. I don't get a vote, so I haven't really worried about it. So I'll have perceived interest and I'll hand this in. Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Jamieson. Do you wish to debate?
No, I think that it's,
okay.
It's
no worries. Thank you.
Question?
Councillor Tonkin.
To speak against the current motion. One of the reasons, I know that the sea does give, the sea takes away, and the sea gives it all back again, but most of the sand that was lost in this area is from the flood in 2016, I believe, which wiped out all the sand in that area. So that's, unless we have another flood, unlikely to happen again between here and when the Waring Street project goes ahead. I think that $37 a tonne is a darn good price for sand that's been scientifically tested, washed and delivered. I wish I could get that at my house for that price. So I think that we should actually go ahead with sand there. So I'm speaking against.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor de Graaf.
Yes, can I move an amendment, please, for the original motion?
No, unfortunately, that is a direct negative, so it can't be accepted as an amendment.
Can I question that, because the one that just moved was a direct negative?
No, Councillor de Graaf, there was no motion on the floor. So this is a totally fresh motion, and your proposed alternative is a direct negative to this motion that we're considering now.
All right, can I have a can I ask a question at this point?
Yep, go ahead.
Just about what Councillor Tonkin said about the flood. So I saw the officers nodding. So is that correct, that this isn't a normal thing, that all the sand was actually washed away in 2016? Could you comment on that one?
Through the chair. Yes, the bulk of the sand, yeah, it was in the area at the time, did get washed away. That obviously lowered that beach area. So your high tides tend to move higher up now on the embankment and flows as well. So, but yeah, you'd say the bulk of sand was there.
All right, and thank you. My other question also is about the actual use of the site, because the information I have is that kids use that all year round, and that there would be still significant use from, say, February to April, just from normal beachgoers. Could you comment on whether I'd be correct in that?
Through the chair, you'd be correct in saying that, yes. Yeah.
All right. Do I have an opportunity to move any kind of motion that is going to, otherwise I'm just going to speak.
Councillor de Graaf, if this fails, then you can move a motion if the one you wanted to do was, but do you want to debate?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank
yes,
you.
Please, I'll debate. Just ask people if they can vote it down, please, so the original motion can get moved. Some of the statements that have been said aren't correct. The sand washed away in 2016. It's an absolute eyesore down there. It's dangerous. It's really slippery. And, you know, the kids and everybody at the beach deserve a lot better than this. Even if the sand comes in February, you've got the normal beach goers that are going to be down there from February to April, because we're getting hot days right up until April now. And there's also the DEX, Department of Education, kids down there with canoes and everything. That's actually like going on all year long. So I don't think there's, you know, any reason to delay this, and it's not going to take away anything from the Waring Street project. The sand will still stay there. It's just helping people actually get to go and use the beach straight away. So I ask people to vote this down so we can get the original one up. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor de Graaf. Councillor Peat.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I urge members to vote this motion down and consider and accept the original motion. I say it because I listened to Councillor de Graaf and particularly Councillor Tonkin. I know this area very, very well, as I lived close proximity to it for over 30 years. And they are right when they say there is as many educational aquatic programs run through the winter as there is through the summer. So let's not lose fact that the use of that area is intensive through the winter period. And more so, the Waring Street project, if, and I say if, it all goes to plan, will not be completed for a number of years. And yet this, members, needs addressing now. It is a safety issue, it's in an appalling state, and for the sake of $15,000 to safeguard those children and keep those aquatic programs running effectively, please, I suggest we vote down this motion and then review and go for the original motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Peat. Councillor Bray.
Just a question first. It's been suggested in the debate that part of the Waring Street improvements might be changes to the profile of the beach. Is that correct? Just changing the...
Through the chair, the profile of the embankment more so than the beach itself.
Okay, so there will be some modifications to the shoreline, so to speak, of the river there. When and if that work is done, and assuming the sand that's put there has happened to stay there, will that sand get in the way, or it can still stay there if the beach profile is altered, or would we lose some of the sand as part of that profile modification?
Through the chair, I'd say the sand would, if it's still there, would need to be just shifted out of the site so they can do all the modifications to the embankment, but you could still reuse it if it's there.
Yeah, so we still would have to move it to do some of the work. And can I debate briefly, Chair? It's a really difficult decision because some really good points have been made on both sides. I think Councillor Tonkin, Councillor de Graaf made some good points. Councillor Peat as well, although I think on the issue of year-round use of the site, that my understanding is people using it as an aquatic site will still persevere and work with what they've got until such time as it's improved. So I'm not necessarily going to assume that activities will cease or that necessarily they may be significantly dangerous, because these activities are well oversighted when they occur anyway, is my understanding. My second point, I think, is that if we are pleased with the proposal for Waring Street that the CEO provides to us, and we'd like to see some progress made, I think the progress probably will be staged so that it can fit into various budgets. And I guess we'd start off with the highest priority works first, which may well be the actual beach itself, because we want people to be able to use that safely pretty much immediately. So I guess there is a possibility, we haven't seen a report, but there's a possibility that the work on the beach profile and sand replacement could happen together without the necessity to move the sand and then move it back again. So I'll just come down on the side of Councillor Olsen and Councillor McMahon at this point, simply based on the fact that we've got a report coming back very soon, and a staged approach may achieve something a bit more cost effectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bray. Councillor de Graaf.
Just questions? Yeah, just two very quick questions. About the safety, could you comment on that? Because to me it does look like it's dangerous at the moment. Is there a safety issue?
Through the chair, look, the current path is obviously degraded and undermined, which is an issue, a safety issue, but also the clay pan that's left on the creek that does get a fair bit of foot traffic and become slippery. You're correct in saying that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then the other one is about, could this be a potential tourist draw card if we were to have sand in there during some hot months?
Through the chair, I'm not sure.
Maybe.
Okay, thank you. Not really a question that they can answer.
Fair enough.
Thank you, Councillor de Graaf. Councillor Peet, question?
Just a brief question, Chair, and sorry, it reflects into my previous, I guess, debate and Councillor Bray's observations. Can I ask the officer, I know operations are there, how long will it take to complete the Waring Street project if all falls into place? If all the skittles are lined up, how long will it take for that project to be completed? And taking on board that it's only presumption of Councillor Bray that it will be the foreshore that we commence with, or the sand portion, it could be any portion of Waring Street. How long will that project take to complete?
Through the chair. So the report for consideration next week will spell out some of the timeframes. There are still works that need to be undertaken to progress that project. We do still have further detailed design and engineering works to complete. We do still propose to seek external funding, as has been previously presented to Council before, to allow the different project components to be delivered. And we also do need approvals to be granted through DA type processes. We still have the Section 23 process to conclude. So I think it's probable, not to steal the CEO's thunder, that we may see a staged implementation of the project, as you've referred to. But it will be a period of all those ducks lined up and delivered. It will be a number of months before any groundworks would commence on any first stage initially. So I guess that's probably as much as we could share today, I think, unless the CEO wanted to add anything. I don't know how long it's going to take to build. No. Have we got any idea? Construction time. So construction time frames have been asked. It'd be in its entirety, looking at 6 to 12 months worth of construction works alone for all of the work, if it was delivered as a single package. But the different funding streams that will deliver the different components will mean that it won't be delivered as a single package, most likely.
Thank you, Chair. Members, please take that under consideration in your consideration.
Thank you, Councillor Peat. I have no further speakers. Councillor Olshan, do you wish to close debate?
Thank you, Chair. And as Councillor Peat just said, please take that into consideration because they've got a report coming next week. And so that's what we should be considering is this exact topic is coming next week. Why wouldn't we make a decision now? And now I'm not against putting sand there if it's needed and next week we find out it's a long-term delivery of this project. Not against it at all because I do understand it. But, you know, our officer here tells us the concrete, which is really bad there, is going to be fixed up. That's an issue and they're going to fix that up. That's a safety issue, the concrete that people are walking over to get to the beach. Those aquatics people aren't walking down the rocks to get to the beach. They walk down onto the sand. And so there is sand there. You know, it's not a barren place. And so I just commend members to wait a week, find out what's actually, get the facts and make some decisions on some facts, not some emotion. And let's find out. And if it ends up next week that all things are going to be delayed, well, then maybe the decision is made then to dump some sand in the interim. But let's get our facts first. It's a week away, for goodness sake. And, you know, let's make that decision then. Now, I think that's all I'll say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Olsen. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? I might do that again. All those for? All those against? That motion is lost. Is there a further motion?
Yeah, I'll put it, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Peat. What's your motion?
As originally printed in our papers.
Okay, thank you. Do you wish to speak?
Yeah, I will. I appreciate what Councillor Olsen's trying to sell us just a week. I think the officers have clearly said in relation to the requirement for external funding and a number of other reports still to come to Council, this Waring Street project is a long way off. And it's imperative we provide that sand base now for the aquatics, if not for this summer, through the winter period where there is as many educational aquatic programs, as I said, run through the winter as there is through this summer, and for next summer, which I'm sure Waring Street still won't be completed by then. So I commend members please to support the current motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor de Graaf, are you seconding that motion? Thank you. Do you wish to speak?
Please. Thank you. Yeah, I was down there not long ago, and when you walk down the path, it's actually all clay. There is no sand down there. It really is slippery. It really is dangerous. I won't repeat things that everyone's already just said, but I think it would be a really good thing for tourism for our area, and I think that might end up being a tourism draw card. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor de Graaf. Councillor Thermaliotis.
Just some questions. Will this sand wash away?
Through the chair, I believe so eventually.
Will it wash away without a flood occurring? So there doesn't have to be a flood for the sand to wash away.
I believe that the sand will stay in, say, a high tide flow. It will hang.
How much, if you could put a couple of months worth, how much fun are the kids going to have in the sand? Do council staff feel that this is a good option? Do you agree with this? Can someone step up and say that this is good?
Sorry, Councillor Thermaliotis, it's not really a question for staff, whether or not that this is something we've asked to come back.
All right, then is it council's place to be doing this? Is it our responsibility?
Through the chair, yes.
Has there been a call from the community that we do this?
Yes.
But evidently the community understand this sand will wash away.
Through the chair, I believe so, yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thermaliotis. Councillor Bray.
Just to follow up on some of the previous discussion, So we are looking at modifying the beach profile. Now, within a staged approach, is that something that it is possible or even easily possible to do early on in such a project?
Through the chair, I don't believe it is. The profile of the actual revetment wall and the flood mitigation, if you like, that's built into that will need us to take back into the car park area as well. So from a staged approach, you would want to be doing all of that infrastructure work at the same time.
Okay, thank you. So.
Thanks, Councillor Bray. Councillor McMahon.
Thank you. Just a question, just for clarification. My understanding is that the educational aquatics happens there during term 1 and term 4 and is closed during the winter months. Is this correct?
Through the chair, look, we're not sure.
Okay.
Not sure exactly.
I believe it is because they will put their applications on my desk. Thank you.
Take that as a rhetorical. Councillor Olsen.
Just clarification, this is a one-off dumping of sand. This is not an annual approval of dumping of sand. Could I have the officer please respond?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Jamieson.
I'm happy to confirm that the aquatic stops over winter. So there is a whole term where there's no aquatics, and many of the teachers shoot overseas. So there is it is shut down for the whole winter term, and then it opens up again at the start of the next term.
Thank you, Councillor Jamieson. Councillor Peake, do you wish to close debate? Thank you, Mayor Thompson. Question.
Can we just seek some clarification on the use of the beach area during the winter? So we've had some clarification around the school groups, but there's a couple of commercial businesses and things that operate down there. I don't think I've ever seen the river without a board of some sort on it. Can we just have some clarity around the use during winter?
Through the chair. Yeah, the aquatics do close down, obviously over winter, but they're, sorry, the school aquatics, but the, yeah, it's still open to the public, and it is a major launching area for kayaks and boats. The surf clubs still use it quite a bit for their surf ski training, from what I've seen, and yeah, overall it is open to the public, and they're still quite heavily used over the winter period.
Thank you. Councillor Tonkin.
Thank you, through the chair. Before you mentioned, even if some of the sand does get washed away, and it probably will, you'll still be learning something from that, so we can still use that as a tool for future use.
Through the chair, that's probably the important part from our perspective is, yeah, to monitor and keep track of what happens to the erosion patterns, and that will inform the designs, or the more detailed designs for the Waring Street project.
Great, thank you. There's no further speakers. Councillor Peake, do you wish to close debate?
Thank you, Chair. Just to cap the last response from the officer, I think just caps it off. It's also a strategic study for us for ongoing design of Waring Street. And also I'd like to just comment on the remark by our Mayor. That is right. I'm not quite sure where these other members are driving, but honestly, when I drive over the Onkaparinga Bridge, and it would be a couple of times every day throughout the year, I just see as many kayaks and canoes in there almost throughout the year. So it's imperative we just clean up, provide this area a safe environment under our duty of care, under OHS, whatever you want to put it, and the amount of sand that will wash away by tidal movement will be minimal. And yeah, let's just get on with it and provide tourist education ourselves with an environment in which we can be proud of.
Thank you, Councillor Peat. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? That motion is carried. Members, just as a quick reminder, I appreciate that people do get frustrated and things do drag on, but if you could just maintain a respectful tone, particularly when you're asking questions of council staff, I would really appreciate that. Item 7.3, management of vehicle compliance on protected foreshore areas, engagement outcomes and proposed motions. Councillor, sorry, are there any updates to this report? No updates. Councillor Peat.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to put this motion to members as is printed in our report. It is, yeah, and please, I'd like to ask a couple of questions if I may.
Go ahead, thank you.
Just with the officers, in reference to page 150, that being the management of vehicles compliance on protected foreshore area action plan, under monitoring and reporting on outcomes to elected members. The elected update for June 2021 comes to council before the commencement of the safety patrols in July 2021. So I gather that this elected member update will be in regards to the installation of infrastructure and the educational program, whereby the monitoring update report in April 2022 will provide information on the effectiveness of the safety patrols. Would that be correct?
Through the chair, that's correct, Councillor Peat. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, and just quickly, yeah, and I reserve the right to close debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peat. That's your right anyway. No need to reserve it. Councillor Bray, you wishing to second that motion? Thank you. Do you wish to speak?
Yeah, Councillor, this has always been a difficult issue because there are competing interests. I note that in the report that the engagement with the various communities and stakeholders came back with some very strong suggestions about what people would like to see and what people would not like to see. And I think that staff have been very responsive in taking those into account, and things that people would not like to see have not been included in the recommendations. So I think it's fair to say that the community engagement has been very fairly taken into consideration in this case. And I think we've tried to be responsive to the wildlife issues, particularly the bird issues. And I think that's a very, very good thing. And I guess I'd like to close by saying that, look, I only hope that in the coming months that we, going off track a little bit, that we start getting to grips with the cat issue in terms of wildlife as well, and give it the same thought and consideration that we've given to this issue. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Bray. I've got no one else indicating they wish to speak. Councillor Peat, you wish to close debate?
Just quickly, Chair, I specifically wish to commend the officers for this comprehensive report and the effort they've gone to here. Absolutely full credit. And I will just remark on Councillor Bray's endorsement, and I'm also incredibly impressed with the quantity and the quality of the community responses, and that the feedback through this engagement process is, as Councillor Bray said, reflected in this motion and the action plan. So I endorse it and commend it to members.
Thanks, Councillor Peat. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? That is moved unanimously. Thank you. Okay, item 7.4, Inclusive Communities Action Plan 2021 to 24. Are there any updates to this report? Thanks, Tara Lee.
Good evening, elected members. I just wanted to take just a couple of minutes to introduce this report to you. You may not be aware that we had a new act, the Disability Inclusion Act in 2018, that required all councils to produce their own Disability Access and Inclusion Plan. Our plan is called the Inclusive Communities Action Plan. And we're fortunate at Onkaparinga that we were ahead of the game. We had a previous Disability Access and Inclusion Management Plan from 2013 to 2018. So the plan that you have before you meets our legislative requirements, builds on our previous plan, aligns with our community plan, where one of the objectives is to support our community's strengths to make our region inclusive for all. So it helps us to deliver that. And the approach we've taken with the extensive community engagement means that we've also met the core brief of the Community Capacity Strategic Plan, which you approved in October, which is involving our communities in local matters to make lives better. And one of the priority groups in that plan was people with disability. So while this plan is a legislative plan that we need to do, it actually aligns with what we've already said that we want to do. The plan has been informed through broad and targeted community engagement, as well as engagement across the organisation, because it is about shaping our organisation to better include people with disability. There's 23 actions, and you'll note in Appendix 2 that we've identified how it delivers on the state government objectives, as well as internally and externally. I'd like to point out that the engagement we undertook in 2019, there were 340 people engaged. 70% of them were people with a disability or the care of someone with a disability. To give you an idea of the quality of that engagement, when the state government developed their Action Inclusion Plan, they engaged with 380 people across the state, 50% of whom either had a disability or someone with a disability in the family. So in terms of getting in touch with and understanding the needs of people with lived experience of disability in our city, we've done an excellent job. So we used the engagement outcomes, the legislative requirements, our community plan and our goals to develop a draft plan, which the legislation then said we needed to go back out to the community to test with the community to make sure that the plan we had come up with was on track. And if you looked at the engagement report, you'll see that 78% of people who responded were happy with the focus areas, and 87% of people thought that the plan reflected the needs of our community. What was different after we went out to engagement, we added in the top priorities from the engagement with the community. And I thought it was interesting to note that the things the community most want us to work on are our footpath accessibility, multiple communication methods, general accessibility around our city, friendly and welcoming customer service, and affordable services and programs. So we've documented that in the plan, that this is what our community's told us. And we've actually increased the focus on affordable programs and services. We've expanded one of the actions to include the intent of the Better Access, Better Business Inclusive Guide, which we've won external funding to deliver. And we've recognised the work of the On Business program in Appendix 1. So we've actually taken note in the second round of engagement and changed the plan to reflect that. One of the things that I think is really positive about the new legislation is that we do need to report every year to the Department of Human Services by the 31st of October, and we can table that report with Council at the same time, so you actually know how we're going. So I'd like to commend this report to you and note that it does really help us deliver on our own goals as well as those of state government.
Thanks, Taralee. Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Yeah, we were one jump ahead of them, it wasn't too almost done. Just with regards to your stakeholder groups, if in future we could tweak it a little bit. First one, I have a question with, you've got friends of groups and community associations. Do you, I guess we're not, the next one, it's 7 community centre boards of management. Now, is this the neighbourhood centres as well?
Yes, so that's the neighbourhood centres.
Good, okay, that knocks that one out. With regards to resident associations, when the public liability came out, most of them fell through the gap because it was just too expensive with public liability. But what we do have is a lot of retirement homes, and they're up to, you know, nursing home age, so forth. So if they could be included in it, I think you'll have quite a significant amount of, some of them have home support, the HAC support, but I think it'd be worthwhile including them in the list, and the over 50s, because the over 50s, you know, they could be 90 and doing carpet bowls, so they capture quite a, particularly the over the one on Candies Road Rec Centre, the age one on Friday, there they capture them from all over the district, and there's quite a lot there.
So we're happy to note those inclusions.
Thanks, Councillor Brown. Councillor Peat.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Please, I've read the report. It's an excellent report, Terry. My question is more about perhaps consistency. I notice on the Your Say side, as it appears in attachment to this report, the Inclusion Community Action Plan, it hasn't got draft on it. Unlike the following report for the Sports and Active Recreational Action Plan that does have draft written on it, it appears that we went out to public consultation with a document that didn't actually asking for comment because of the draft, but the document didn't have draft written on it. Can I just have a comment on that?
Through you, Chair. Looking at the version in front of me, the draft in this case is as a watermark. And that's, I've downloaded this from the website. So whereas maybe with the other one, the draft was put on in a different way.
Okay. Well, I mean, so long as it went out showing the community that clearly it was a draft. I mean, on the attachment we have in our report, attachment 1, clearly draft as a watermark or anything else, I can't see it, but no, I take that on board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Jamieson.
I'd like to move the motion if I could.
Yep, go ahead.
And
would you like to debate?
No, I don't want to comment or debate, but I think there's a lot of information in here, and I think we all agree it's very important to our city. So I'd just like to move that motion.
Thanks, Councillor Jamieson. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor de Graaf. Yep. Do you wish to speak? No, okay. But no one else indicating they wish to speak, so I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Members, I'm just noting the time, 8:22. I think the next one's probably going to take a little while. Did you want to move for a quick break now? Did someone wish to move that way? Thanks, Councillor de Graaf. Councillor O'Brien, all those in favour? Okay, members will take a 10-minute break and meet back here at 8:32. Thank you. Let me get to that. I do have a couple of people indicating. Councillor Bray, do you wish to move the motion?
Yes, I'd like to move the motion.
Before I get you started, there is a presentation. I apologise.
Oh, okay.
And we'll go ahead with that. Thank you.
Through the chair. I'm just going to give a short presentation on this body of work before it's considered by yourselves. Which is the down button. Oh, click it. Excellent. Thank you.
Did you turn it off? I didn't press the button.
This is a fantastic start.
It is great.
Excellent.
All right.
We're presenting tonight the draft Sport and Active Recreation Action Plan. This came about through a review of the former Sport and Active Rec Strategic Management Plan that was in place between 2014 through to now. Before starting this project, we did a review of that strategy, and the main outcome was that it was a good strategy and we should keep the focus, but really to focus on improving implementation and reducing the number of actions. So that's been some of our writing instructions. Just to give you a feel for sport and recreation in the city of Onkaparinga, There's been a real move to active recreation, so away from sport, and the most popular pastimes are walking, fitness, swimming and so forth, those things that can be done in an unstructured way and at any time. We've particularly seen that through COVID. There's been real growth in those things. But sport is still really popular and really integral to our community, and we saw that through consultation on the community plan. And some of the traditional sports are still very popular, like AFL. We're seeing growth in soccer and netball. So some really positive things there, and we know that kids are more likely to participate in organised sport, which really grows that hopefully lifelong participation and being active. But our biggest challenge across the city is 50% of our population aren't meeting the recommended weekly levels of physical activity. So that's a real challenge. 50% of our population aren't doing enough. What we're seeing too is that in some of our most challenged socio-economic areas, in the central north and central south, we're seeing lower levels of participation. And that's one of the focuses of this action plan, is to get more activity in those areas in particular. So in drafting this action plan, it's been an 18-month process. It's been a very rigorous process. It's been an expansive process. There's been a lot of consultation done along the way. 8 core projects have informed this action plan. There's been detailed research and analysis, and there's been, as I touched on, plenty of engagement. To take you through those 8 sub-projects, we did trends analysis to understand what was going on in sport and recreation to inform this action plan. Levels of service of sports assets is looking at to what level we'll deliver our sporting facilities, what sizes will change rooms be, what sizes will club rooms be, to what levels we'll deliver our ovals, our pitches and so forth. So that's an important level of work, what we need, to what level will we deliver it. Number 3 is to the levels of service for how we'll work with our clubs to support them to become safe and welcoming for people to participate. So that's a lot of the work we do with clubs around their governance, ensuring they're financially sustainable, and also to support them in building their volunteer base. And that's integral to support sport and active recreation in our community. The Sports Asset Work Plan, we'll touch on that tonight. That's a 10-year plan for the pipeline of capital works and facilities we'll do and invest in to support sport. And then number 5, we've looked at management models for our multi-use sports facilities. We've got 9 significant sites where there's multiple sports like Aldinga, Ranella, Morphettvale Vale and so forth. And there's also 4 community-owned sites. So the management of those is really quite complex, and that needs a lot of focus and a lot of support. Also, all these facilities, there's leases and licenses, different forms of tenure with our relationship with those sporting clubs. And there's been a real focus on that, working with other councils and through the Local Government Association. And we've also done a recreation centre review, which was presented to council last year, informed our decision making on our position on the Ranella East College proposal. There's also informing some work we'll do on the Noarlunga Rec Centre and also Aldinga Rec Centres. And then finally, we've been partnering with other councils to look at a Southern Adelaide regional strategy, focus on tennis, netball and cricket. So there's a lot of work there, and the reason why we're running through that and just providing an overview to council, whilst you see a 22-page action plan tonight, there's been individual bodies of work that have been developed and will live on to inform our planning and our delivery of sport and rec through the city. So there's a significant amount of work and consultation sitting behind this plan. Just to run you through the structure of the plan, this is similar to plans you've seen in recent times. So it's our approach, how we're going to deliver. There's 3 goals, 22 actions, and then there's those ongoing actions from the former SARS and Active Rec Management Plan, because that is good and important work that we should keep focus on. So with respect to this action plan, there's 3 main goals, and I think there's for want of better words, beauty in their simplicity, that our main goal is to increase participation in sport and active recreation, getting people involved. We then need to build the capacity of clubs and other providers so that they can support and continue to facilitate that increased participation. It's about making clubs safe and welcoming to everybody. And then thirdly is developing facilities and investing in facilities, building new facilities to support increased growth. And those things are all interrelated, but they're all important in their own right. Get people involved, support clubs, develop facilities. So unpack those just quickly. So goal 1, increase participation. Actions are things, examples of things we're doing there is breaking down barriers to participation, particularly in those low socio-economic areas. And some of the work that we're going to be starting soon at Moreton Road to support the large investment there with Roger Rashid and some of his programs is an example where we can support a challenged community. Getting people into our rec centres and our aquatic centre and our golf course is utilising some of our major facilities and making the most of those for the community. And also just measuring physical activity will help us focus our investment and our programs. With our clubs, the investment and the relationship there is really important as we continue to build that and support those clubs with their governance, with leasing and simplifying those and enabling them to be more self-sufficient. We're hoping with maintenance works they can do themselves. Establishing a single point of contact in the recreation services teams, improving that support into clubs, and also reviewing their fees and charges again relates to their sustainability. I think the big one and the challenging one and the thing that clubs and the community really focused on is improving our facilities. We do have a massive portfolio of assets out there. Our service guidelines are helping us be consistent with to what level we develop facilities across the city. Our 10-year sports asset work plan is informed by this action plan, and it will give us a clear line of sight and direction for investment into the future, and reviewing some of our major facilities in context of school proposals to ensure those indoor sports facilities deliver as best they can. Resourcing, always a challenge. This action plan will be resourced from existing resources with exclusion of the capital projects. So the capital projects will be resourced through our ongoing budgets through the Project and Capital Works program and through the major projects. As always, and importantly, the investment in this action plan is informed by our long-term financial plan and the strategic asset management plan, which have recently been considered by council and being consulted on. The sports asset work plan is an output of SARAP, so of the action plan. So tonight we're looking for endorsement of the action plan to go to consultation in February. But the first major output of the action plan is the sports asset work plan. We've made some good progress with that, but it still remains a work in progress. And we propose that that be released for public information in February at the same time we go out with the action plan. The Asset Works plan has been a real focus of the Onkaparinga Clubs Forum, which is a fantastic group which has been advocating for sport to council. We briefed them on the status of where we're at with the action plan last week, and they were comfortable where we're at and looking forward to seeing that document come out in February. So the next steps, subject to your support tonight, we propose to engage on the action plan early next year and bring the final action plan back mid next year. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you very much. Councillor Brady, do you want to hit your button again? Thank you, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to move a motion, but also ask a question beforehand. Can you go back a couple of slides on the presentation, please? And one back. Yeah, just in relation to the works program, that implies the number of capital works involved in that, over quite a number of capital works, that would be correct. So the delivery of those capital works over time will depend on where council lands in terms of the amount of debt that it wants to take on and how that moves projects around in order to make them fundable. So given that we're still working on where we want to land on that, how can we release to the public information in February 2021 when we haven't actually worked out the appetite for debt and how that's going to affect staging of projects?
Yeah, through the chair, my understanding is that we're currently consulting a long-term financial plan and they look to be brought back to the council about the same time. The works plan that we're putting together is in the context of our current budget parameters and largely focuses on the project and capital works component of that. So we'll consider those things together. What's going out in February with the 10-year works plan is just for information. And then it'll be finalised when it's considered by council as part of the budget process.
So you're saying that a lot of the focus is on rather major projects on capital works, a lot of which is recurrent budget funded anyway.
That's right.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to move a motion with one minor change on page 215. Which is just be the removal of dot point 1 under goal 1.
So it's removal of dot point 1 under goal 1 on page 20 of the plan.
Yeah, page 215 of the agenda and page 20 of the plan. Yes.
Thank you. Yes, do you wish to debate?
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, I was a little bit concerned about dot point 1 supporting representative athletes with costs associated with the competing interstate and internationally, because it seems a bit like voluntary cost shifting to me, something we all complain about and then we occasionally seem to self-inflict upon ourselves. I've spoken to a number of councillors about my amendment before proposing it, and there seemed to be a good support there. Councillor Thameliotis made the point that in fact the state government has a fund that is used to assist representative athletes with costs associated with the competing interstate or internationally. And in terms of assisting these athletes, my understanding was that any necessary assistance funding came from 3 sources: state, federally, especially when talking about the Olympics, and also the sports association, the peak body of the particular sports concerned. Council's role is more of a grassroots active participation, was my understanding, so I'm not quite sure why this is in here. And I just alert councillors to the risks that are involved with having this in here, because if this becomes policy, then it's actually saying that we're going to do it. And so a person who wishes to compete internationally could therefore come to council and say, well, can you please give me a hand to fund me? And then when word gets around, there could be a flood of applications to council, if this is our policy, to assist people or teams to travel interstate or overseas for competition, and that's just not something I thought council was involved in. So to keep it simple, I think we should delete this, but if there is a compelling case for someone within our community who wishes to compete interstate or overseas and comes to council with an appropriate request, that makes sense to us, then as a chamber, there's no reason why we can't do it anyway. So I think we should leave this out of our policy for now and just focus on the grassroots of active participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bray. Councillor Jamieson, are you wishing to second? Okay, do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor O'Brien, do you wish to speak? Thank you.
Just a question in relation to what Councillor Bray's put forward in terms of the amendment. I mean, my understanding of that is that we're doing it at the moment. Could I get some feedback from officers in terms of the numbers, the sports, very briefly, the amounts that are being paid and the process that goes along? Is it widely known? Are people in the community knowing about it, using it, and what's the budget for it, or how much do we spend each year on it?
Through the chair, it's the Sport and Active Recreation Donations Program. I've been here 12 years. It's been running for that whole time. It's funding we provide, or small donations we provide at grassroots level for people who've been selected to represent their club or team or sport at national or international level. As I said, very small donations of around, I think it's $80 for an individual and maybe 150 or so for teams. We generally use all the funding each year and probably receive around about 100 applications or thereabouts.
So, sorry, how much is the funding, the total fund?
10,000.
10,000.
Used to be funded through the PCW process, and now it's an ongoing operationally funded.
All right, thank you. And if I could just speak in terms of seconding the motion. I mean, I'm really proud of the work. Well, thank you for all the work that you've done. I found one of the difficult things when I was a newly elected member was coming in and sporting clubs coming in here and mounting cases and sort of pulling on heartstrings and saying, you know, this is falling down, this is, and sort of, you know, and there didn't seem to be a process or a strategy for actually identifying how we would go about it. And I think what we've been able to do, what you've been able to do, and I think that there's been some input from former staff as well with this one. I think you've been extremely innovative in terms of putting everything together, and you know, I'm really looking forward to this going out to consultation. I think it's a significant piece of work, and it's going to make our lives a lot easier, I suspect.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Jamieson.
Yeah, I will speak, and I just initially I'll ask you to vote that down, because that's, you know, giving a group of kids going away $80 or something like that when we just spent 15 grand on sand. So I think it's it might be something you need to consider, that this is working. Look, the document itself, to me, it stands out. You know, more than 50% of our community are not sufficiently physically active. You know, what we're doing, this is just not the negative thing. What we're doing with these people, we are actually threatening their lifestyle. We all know that we've come through life and we've kept active and we've kept moving along, and then we've managed to keep that, I guess, flexibility and all the rest of it later on into our life. And I think that's a very important part of that. So the other thing is, there's the physical part of it, and there's also, you need to be part of a team, a community, all of those comradeships, things that we all come through as kids. So I think that this is a very important document here, because the other part that people don't realise, sport in some way reduces mental issues, you know, things like that. You know, I used to swim with my son, you know, 4 or 5K in the morning, and I never really knew anything about things called endorphins, which is, you know, when you're stressed and things like that, then your body releases the endorphins, and that happens. So this whole thing about physical activity is super important from, I guess in lifesaving we used to say, from birth to death, because if you need to keep on going in some capacity. So I support the program. I'm just a little bit worried about being mean and for $80 for, you know, or of a team going away for an event. I just think that's small-minded.
Thank you, Councillor Jamieson. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I've got a lot of others, but I always raised the money for my kids when they went interstate, and the clubs that when we had members that were interstate, we didn't even have Office of Rec and Sport. We went around private enterprise and got some funding towards it. So I don't have a problem with that 10,000 going to another direction. If they're active in playing sport, I'm sure they're active in many other areas with the Office of Rec and Sport, with their federal member, and astute when there are elections coming on to put the heavies on their members of parliament. I've got a couple of questions with regards to the report. We used to have the sports in the city of Onkaparinga and the participation level. And reading this, I was sailing blind because I couldn't work out. All it says is AFL and soccer and netball, most popular sports. But I don't see the numbers and I don't see the participation. And is there a record or is there an opportunity of having some form of a record for the elected members in the near future?
Through the chair, yes, we've listed in SARAP the top 5 participation sports in the city and their figures, the participation or player participation figures. In the body of work that Ross Planning did, the trends analysis and research piece, we researched the national, state and local level participation and listed that information in the report. I recall the elected members, we had a workshop to discuss those and identify whether you thought or not there are other demands we weren't aware of or high participation sports that weren't showing through those figures. The local level data is very unreliable. There's a gap in the industry and we're working hard to try and understand ourselves what the local level participation is. We ask annually our clubs to provide those figures because they're not available generally anywhere else unless we go directly to state associations, which we do as well, to double check our figures. But ultimately, it can be unreliable in terms of what we receive, and it depends on the context they perceive we're asking, what they want us to know, in all those sort of variables. So the data is limited. What we can obtain, we've included in our various research pieces to inform SARAP, and what we presented in the document is the top 5 participation and the participation figures, as well as a trend line for how they're performing in terms of increasing or decreasing participation over the last 4 or 5 years.
So if that can be made available, I'd appreciate it. And I'm sure some of the other elected members would like to see it, because we network with the clubs. The clubs ask us, and I'm sure the clubs would like to have an idea of where they're trading. And as an elected member, we need to see what's the most popular sports, where the pressure are on that area, and then where all the other sports are. So appreciate that. Further, with regards to this, we have a level of inequity that we need to deal with at some stage. Are we planning on dealing with some clubs we supply water for, other clubs that we don't? Some clubs we mow their lawns, other clubs we don't. Are we looking at dealing with this in our future plan?
Oh, through the chair, definitely. And that's the sports assets levels of service is a critical part of that, with ensuring that equity. And with respect to those other matters you described with respect to irrigation and lawn mowing and so forth, again, considering equity where possible across clubs is imperative. Obviously, the challenge is there's always localised conditions and considerations we've got to work through, but equity is always front of mind.
And further, we have a gap with the seniors in participating in sport. The school's fairly active in that area, and so are the parents, but as they get to a retirement village or so, they tend to sit and watch the television, and there are facilities around. So are we networking with some of these retirement villages and some of these facilities where the over 50, the Wakefield House where they do billiards and snooker and so forth, the Hub Recreation Centre, they have a Friday with all the seniors there. It keeps them active, and we don't have a lot of it, but we need to be able to promote it with the seniors.
Oh, definitely. We're really focused on that as a great opportunity, like it is about lifelong being active lifelong and participation. We've got our healthy active lifestyles Onkaparinga program, and we also partner with our active ageing groups in council at those facilities to make the most of those opportunities. And you touch on the indoor rec centres. I think with those centres coming back in-house, there's fantastic opportunities we see to activate those more for the older age groups. And there's some really interesting sports like modified football and so forth, things where you can basically stand or walk and play a game rather than running. So that's an example of where a traditional sport's becoming more flexible and accessible for people as they get older. So there's great opportunities there.
So how do we promote that with the seniors?
Directly through as many channels as possible, through the centres, through our networks, through providers, and with council working together with our different groups. I think we can do that quite successfully.
Difficulty I have is people in retirement villages that I speak to have moved to the area, probably to get a little closer to their kids, but they've come from all over, at least 30 or 40 kilometres, some of them several hundred kilometres away, so they don't know the area. And us Aussies, they like someone to hold their hand and take them there. So there needs to be some welcoming, some way of maybe we used to have residents welcome packages or whatever, but if we could do something with some of the retirement villages, because it's not just going into the retirement village and playing bowls at the retirement village, it's actually getting out of the retirement village and doing something external that they don't seem to do.
I think that's a great suggestion to actually, communicate more with those centres.
Thanks, Councillor Brown. Councillor Olsen.
Thank you, Chair. You talk about a single point of contact. In the past, we've never had a single point of contact. It's always been one for clubs and one for assets. And, if you want to get something new up and going, I had a colleague wanted a new netball club, Ranella, but, talk to the clubs people, but they needed some grounds and, courts. And so is it truly a single point of contact, or is it still going to be one for clubs and one for assets?
Through the chair, no, we're committed to a single point of contact. So my role's been created, to help support that together with the team. And I've been focusing initially on the relationship through the Onkaparinga Clubs Forum, working with them and building that relationship and testing their expectations, and increasingly meeting with clubs and so forth. I was down at Wollonga last week meeting with that committee. So for particular matters and particular considerations, I'm with single point of contact, but recreation's huge and there's so many touch points in the organisation. So it's about channeling those things through. So this role is important, but how we work together and organise ourselves to provide the best service is equally important.
Okay. And because it's going out for community engagement, we're not approving the thing, it's fine. I guess a comment that it appears to be far more of a sports action plan than a sports and active recreation plan, action plan. And, the only bit it talks, I guess, really about the active recreation, which you've identified at the front is the biggest bit that people do now, is the Appendix 2, which then talks about trail strategies and all the rest of it.
Yeah, that's right.
Is there an opportunity to maybe split those action plans into a sports ones and one to recreation, or it just feels to me when I read it, it does talk a little bit about active recreation, but it's far more the sports clubs orientated action plan.
Yeah, and that's a good comment, and we're happy to have a look at that. And as we say in the plan, there's a lot of big strategies to sit behind it. For example, our Coast Park plan is it's comprehensive and it's robust, and there's big investment that goes behind that, and that infrastructure supports active recreation in so many different ways. Our skate facilities plan, again for the youth, big investment, big infrastructure really supports that. The trail strategy does as well. So I think on the face of it, it can be seen to be very sport dominated. But I think the thing is what we do to promote participation in that active recreation, which is coming out of this action plan, which is really important. And goal 2, how we build our relationships with providers to have them supporting active recreation. Yeah. So I think from an infrastructure point of view, it could be seen to be quite sport focused. But if we look at that as goals 1 and 2 around increasing participation and building provider capacity, it is equally active recreation focused.
Certainly goal 1, you're right, it does include it there, but the rest of it doesn't really bring it in, because this is meant to be of both.
Yes.
And it seems more like, I'll just leave that as a comment for you to think about. And the other was community-owned clubs. Really, the only bits in there tells me that you're going to review their fees and charges and define the funding responsibility of council. So it's the only bits in there that talk about supporting those community-owned facilities. Is there an ability to extrapolate out a little bit more to say about supporting those community-owned things rather than reviewing their fees and charges and defining a funding responsibility? It doesn't really provide any substance to say we'll provide assistance or at least acknowledge those facilities.
Look, that's a good comment. We'll take that on board. We do look to provide a similar level of support for community facilities and clubs as we do for council. So when it comes to the work we do with a community-owned management committee, like say Willunga Rec Ground, it's the same as we do for a council ground. If they're looking for guidance on development of facilities, we'd apply our same levels of service. If we're considering providing funding for a community rec ground, we would consider that, but we'd consider in the context of other council proposals, and it would probably be something that would come to council as a one-off basis given that ownership structure. So, you know, in general, it's a very similar level of support for those clubs because you recognise they're equally important. They've just got a different ownership structure.
I just don't think that's come through in this document. So I won't put it up there as some amendment because it's only going out for community engagement. However, when it does come back to us for approval, I guess I'll be looking for something a little bit more in there. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Olsen. Got no one else indicate? Sure.
So once this gets implemented or approved, how's it going to be reported against? How are we going to know that in 2 years' time you've achieved what you've said you're going to achieve?
Yeah, through the chair, a simple answer, we propose to report annually on our progress against the plan. You know, that'll be, you know, reporting on projects delivered and how they support the goals of the action plan. Really important thing and a focus, and it relates back to Councillor Brown's question. We want to you know, really improve the way we measure participation so that we can then measure, you know, the outcomes of this plan and the investment we make. So yeah, ongoing reporting will be important.
I might just do a quick debate, Chair. Look, I never actually realised we did provide funding to our international athletes. That was news to me. I didn't realise that. On face value, I didn't find anything wrong with Councillor Bray's dot point there, but on hindsight, if it's only $80 per person, and I guess I won't be supporting this when pulling this one out. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Olsen. Councillor Peach.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Olsen just took my thunder. I couldn't agree more. I did always realise we did sponsor international and interstate potential athletes, and I think it's a very worthy way of doing this. And $80 here, $80 there, you know, these athletes and young kids, they're grabbing a little money from here, there and everywhere to do the best in their sporting activity and represent this city. So, yeah, I totally agree with Councillor Olsen, and I won't be supporting this motion with dot point 4 inclusion.
Thanks, Councillor Peach. Councillor Bray, that's the end of debate. Do you wish to close?
Yeah, councillors, just on that final dot point, I think you need to probably see it in the context of $10,000 and consider over the life of these programs, which some of them run for 5 or 10 years, we're not $10,000 over 10 years becomes $100,000. These grants are not about active recreation at the basic participation level. What we're now talking about are people within the community who are basically following their passion, and for some reason, because it's sport, we want to give them money. But what if they're people who still are active physically in the community, but their passion happens to be art or music or the environment. I just think that if someone's at the, if their particular passion is such that they're working at this state or international level in their sport, then the normal course of events would be they'd be funded through clubs, family, state, federal funds and association funds. And I'm not sure that really that's a role for council. If someone is from a financial background that's really difficult and they need some support, well then possibly through council's social support programs, that may be an avenue to assist them. But I'm not sure that we should, and these are not big sums, $80 or $150. These are sums that people should be able to find if they're going to be travelling interstate or overseas. I'm not sure that's council's role. And if it's a team of 10, $150, we're talking about $15 each. So I'm really not sure whether, you know, it's a visit to McDonald's or somewhere. So I'm really not sure whether this is where we should be spending actually a not insignificant sum of money. So I just think we should let people follow their own passion, whatever it is, sport or otherwise, and fund it the way they choose to. So yeah, I just ask you for your support on that basis. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Bray. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? That motion is lost. Is there a further motion? Councillor Jamieson, if you could hit your button, please. Thank you.
I'll put everything but 4, yep.
Okay, so Councillor Jamieson is moving the original motion as written in the agenda. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Olsen, do either of you wish to speak? Councillor de Graaf, do you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you. Just a brief debate and just a quick question as well. Just for clarity, this is actually talking about supporting disabled athletes though, not just normal sports people, was it? Disabled athletes, yeah, so not just normal sports people. I'm not aware of that the council does have any social support programs that other than this. Could the staff comment on that? There are any other social support programs that a person could apply to if they didn't have this? Because I'm not aware of any.
Through the chair, it's not specifically for people with disability. It's for anyone in the community to apply for. We don't specifically state who is eligible in that context. The other source of funding for something like this is through the federal government. It's a local champions program. And actually I can't recall what the figure that's available through that program. It's again a very nominal amount. What we found in our research for this action plan is cost is a major barrier to participation. When we have parents with multiple children and potentially children who've got talent and multiple children are selected in pathways programs, it can become a significant burden on those parents for representation. And the small amount that we provide, as one councillor said, does assist when it's bundled up with other sources of funding they're able to obtain. Other councils also provide this sort of funding program or donations program. So we're potentially open for criticism if we're not continuing it as to why we wouldn't do it and others do.
Yes.
But to answer your question, the federal government is another source.
So the federal government's another source, but the council definitely doesn't have any social support programs otherwise. Yeah, so this is the only thing. So I'll debate at this point then. Yeah, I do definitely support this program. And someone who's played sport for a while, when I was younger, I participated in SAPSASA. And I don't actually agree that it is that easy for families to be able to come up with $80 or $150 for these, you know, specific programs to go into state or whatever, and every little bit helps. So I definitely in support of the current motion.
Thanks, Councillor de Graaf. I've got no further indicators wishing to speak. So unless you wish to close debate, Councillor Jamieson, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? That motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on, item 7.6, the Heritage Grant application for works at 62 Grants Gully Road, Clarendon. And is there an update to this report, if you know? No. Members, what is your wish? Councillor Thermaliotis? Okay, do you wish to speak? All right, Councillor Thermaliotis has moved as written. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Bray, do you wish to speak? No. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Preservation of heritage is considered a core business of local government, and although this seems like a lot of money to give to one individual, the one thing we need to do and stop and think about is that the majority of our built heritage that exists out there is actually paid for by individuals, not by governments at various levels, and it is in fact the incredibly large investment by individuals, often in the hundreds of thousands, in some cases probably over $1 million in some instances, that actually gives us our built heritage that exists today. So if council is to assist in preserving that, this is probably the only way we can do it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bray. Councillor Brown?
Yes, I'd just like to, at some stage when the history is available, to who actually built this home, I'd love to read about it.
Through the chair, a brief history is available on our council's website. So if you just put in built heritage in the search and search for the address, it should come up.
And it'll come up who built it?
That information is currently not available. That would require a little bit more research. So the information that's on website has been provided through the heritage survey that was conducted a few years ago.
Do we have it?
Yep. So
I would just like to know who built it. That would have been Happy Valley Council, wouldn't it? Okay.
Yeah. So as per the historical records, we are uncertain of the date of construction, but we've got the name of the owners that own that particular property.
Yeah, no, it would have an incredible, the size of that home and the built form of that home will have some really good history.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I have no one else wishing they wish to speak. Councillor Thermaliotis? Councillor Bray covered. Then I will put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously again. Moving on, item 7.7, council and committee reporting schedule. There's no updates to this report. Members, what is your wish? Councillor Thermaliotis moving it again. Do you wish to speak? No. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Eaton, do you wish to speak? No. Councillor Brown?
Question on the 18th of January, we've got equestrian clubs and facilities. Can I have that clarified?
Through the chair, that was the report that was requested from council with regards to the relocation of Aldinga Equestrian.
Right, so it's singular, not multiple. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Councillor Brown. I've got no one else indicating they wish to speak. Sorry, thank you.
Through the chair, just a point of clarification, that's the two clubs at Aldinga, not singular. That's the relocation of the two clubs at Aldinga, not singular club.
Great, thanks, Kirk. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Item 7.8 is the Ghana Relationship Structure Proposal. I understand there's an update to this report. Thank you.
You're on.
Thank you, Chair, through the Chair. Sorry about spilling the water. I'd like to introduce this paper to the Chamber and explain that the proposal, the Ghana Relationship Structure Proposal, provides an opportunity for Council to address three key things. The proposal provides us with an opportunity to address our existing obligations under native title determination to the Ghana Yurta Aboriginal Corporation, which is the prescribed body corporate, which is important, but as well it gives us an opportunity to respond to our local Ghana community, which is represented by STOMP. So it also provides for the Council and for the administration to create a far more efficient and coordinated approach across the organisation in how we engage with Ghana and other Aboriginal communities. And thirdly, and importantly, it provides us with a foundation for delivering better outcomes for our Ghana community. With regard to why you've received it in the time frame you have, there has been increased interest and discussion around how we engage with our Ghana community and other Aboriginal communities, and within the community itself and also amongst elected members. So a key part to explain why it's come where it has is that while we have had indicative support over some time, we received written support from Jeffrey Newchurch, and we've had report from Carl Telfer, and these are our two key Ghana senior members that actually represent Ghana Yurta Aboriginal Corporation and STOMP. And having that written support for this approach is very significant for us and provides a constructive foundation to move forward with our engagement with our Ghana community. So what we are asking elected members and councillors today is to approve the advisory group model, which we have been researching as per the resolution from May the 5th. And we're asking that Council appoint Carl Telfer as the chair of the advisory group. That's actually quite important too, because Carl is both a member of Ghana Yurta Aboriginal Corporation and also a senior member of STOMP. And we're asking that Council approve us as the staff to work with Carl as the chair to establish the process for appointing remaining members and consulting with the key Ghana stakeholders in developing the terms of reference. And to note that the report will come back to Council in early 2021, detailing outcomes of the above, including the costs, sitting fees, terms of reference and proposed membership, as well as seeking nominations from elected members to be members on the advisory group. Commend the report to Council.
Thanks, Julia. Mayor Thompson.
Happy to move as written. Just briefly, because Julia just stole all of my thunder. Thank you to the staff who put this together. I know that you've put a huge amount of effort into developing this report. We all know that engaging with our traditional owners is extremely important, and unfortunately, I don't think we've ever done it particularly well. So I'm really excited about this opportunity to take a very progressive step forward, an incredibly important step, so that we're able to have more respectful and meaningful, productive engagement with our Ghana community. I think we've seen there's been some, topical projects over recent times where it's sort of felt like this last minute scramble from some Ghana representatives to feel like they've had a say because they felt like the process hadn't been as good as it could be from the beginning of those projects. So what I'm really excited about is that this panel will provide us with a formalised structure that's clear and transparent. It's clear who we're talking to and how we're talking to them. It it speaks to both those peak bodies that Julia mentioned, as well as our local Southern Kaurna voice, which is critical in successful engagement here with them. And just provides us some clarity, which will make it a lot easier for us as elected members to make clear, informed, transparent decisions around these important projects and the impact that it's having on the land. So, like Julia said, there's still a few things to iron out, such as the terms of reference of this group, the membership of the group. But we'll work that out when it comes back to council early, hopefully in the new year. And so right now I'm just asking you all to please support this motion and this incredibly important step forward in the way that we engage with our traditional owners. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Thompson. Councillor Bray, you wishing to second the motion? Okay, I might just look for a seconder first. Councillor de Graaf, wishing to second, do you wish to speak? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ditto, I'd like to say that I agree with the comments that the Mayor's just said, and also just thank you for everybody who's put in their effort involved with bringing forward this report and any of the engagements as well. I really appreciate all of the information that's in here. It's really, really useful. I will just point out one thing though, that it's not actually listing the names of the two senior women of water in our region, which is Buster Turner and Auntie Georgina. And the fact that we've got the Onkaparinga River and the estuary, when the matters are dealing with water, I think generally the men would defer to the women in those cases. So, but overall, I really, really do appreciate the information that's in here. It mentions ARAB in here as well, the recognised Aboriginal representative body. And so I just wanted to point out on that as well that I am aware that Auntie Georgina has put her name down for that role back in 2018 as well. So I guess we'll see, how things, pan out in the future with that. And also just to comment on the consent determination as well, the information that's in here about the title information. So those areas aren't here in the city of Onkaparinga, but the groups have actually said that, with the native title, the groups have actually given up the majority of their land, and then they've got land use agreements on something like 10 or 12 specific areas. But there's virtually nothing really been done yet of how those groups can actually use those areas as well. So it would be really nice to see all of this progress. And this report's really encouraging because it says that the state is also wanting to do meaningful things in this area. So I look forward to see how that rolls out, and I support the motion. So I recommend that to other members as well.
Thanks, Councillor de Graaf. Councillor Bray.
Thank you. This was, as I often am, concerned about the costs. So I was concerned to see sitting fees involved here. What sort of costs you anticipate talking about here?
Through the chair, actual costs are yet to be determined in sitting fees. So in the paper, we've given the Port Adelaide Enfield Advisory Group, we've given an indicative cost of a sitting fee of $125 per hour. That's Port Adelaide Enfield. Oh, sorry, is that Holfast Bay? My apologies. We will look at advisory group models across and determine the cost to come back, but that would not be an unusual figure across similar advisory groups that we've researched.
Okay, so $125 per hour, and that's for every member on the advisory group?
It'll be for the Kaurna representatives, not the elected members.
Yeah, and roughly how many hours is a sitting considered to be?
the average is 2 hours that we've researched to date, but all of the detail and how many regularity, frequency of meetings and length is yet to be determined, and that's what we'll be bringing back to the chamber in early 2021. I should point out that we already engage on Ghana, with Ghana and other Aboriginal communities across the organisation. And at the moment, I would say that while we do that on individual projects, trying to do it in a holistic manner, I would say that we probably could make it far more efficient if we have a coordinated approach. So I think, Councillor Bray, that we would probably see some efficiencies in the way we do things across.
But we don't pay so-called sitting fees now when we engage, do we?
We would be paying for services such as monitoring. We would be the time spent with regarding staff and projects progress can be costly. So I would say that there actually is a cost to how we do things at the moment.
Okay, I'm happy to debate. Council, I'm not sure about the concept of the sitting fees. We have other groups within the city, which I regard as advisory groups, which put in incredible time on a voluntary basis, such as Lunga Environment Centre and Clarendon Community Association. These are all groups which I regard as advisory groups, and I'm not sure whether the fact that this one is formalised under council's auspices is sufficient reason that sitting fees should apply to the meetings compared to other groups in the community of long standing and with the most incredible commitment in terms of time. So I'll just flag that I'm happy to support it, see the report come back, maybe with pros and cons around sitting fees. I mean, I agree that this process will be of great benefit to the council, no question of that. But whether sitting fees should apply to these people who are advocating for their particular part of the community versus other groups that advocate without that sort of payment, I'm not sure on that. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Bray. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Julia and Mike, for the report, the speed of the report and the depth of the report. Enjoyed reading that. Can I just ask a question in relation to whether the Ghana community are unified in their support of this advisory group approach? Is there unification across the Ghana community that they've identified that this as their best approach?
Through the chair, it's unusual to get complete unanimous support across any community, and that would be equally the same for the Ghana community and other Aboriginal communities. However, importantly, the leadership have approved and supported this approach. So I think that's a very constructive foundation from us.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Olsen.
Thank you for pulling this together so quickly. And does that mean once this is established, we no longer have all these other people to Stomp and Kanacha and all these other people to talk to? It'll all be funneled through this one group, and when we have this, we won't be going to all these other areas.
Through the chair, that's our expectation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Olsen. Councillor Brown.
Yes, I guess it has merit in that respect, but I have warning bells ringing when I get a report on my desk that I don't have time to absorb, and I'm told that there was something sent to us today, which I hadn't had the time to read. I read my agendas on Tuesdays, not set up the emails. So on the basis that I haven't had time to really look at it, and that I get a report so late, it usually gives me warning bells, because I haven't had any time to check with the aggrieved that have been doing deputations before council, and they're not listed as in here. So in that respect, I won't be supporting it.
Thanks, Councillor Brown. Councillor de Graaf, a question only.
Yep, just a quick question. Wondering if the staff member or some of the other staff members in the room might be able to comment on various other panels and various other, groups who need to be paid for things, because I understand that this is fulfilling our legislative requirements as well, and that is the reason why people need to be funded, for actually attending. Things like prudential reports and council assessment panels, etc.
Through the chair, Councillor de Graaf, the payment of sitting fees is really for the specialist knowledge, that it's not a legislated requirement. We do have requirements regarding under the Aboriginal Heritage Act and under the Native Title Act, but there is nothing that specifies payment. But it is pretty much the way that we engage specialist knowledge through advisory groups and panels such as this.
Could you give some examples of some of the other ones at council where people are already getting paid for things similar?
An individual. Okay. Through the chair, Councillor de Graaf, we on the cap, sitting fees are $350 per meeting for the independent.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor de Graaf. Councillor Bray, you had a question? Is there any debate? Yeah, Councillor Bray, just a question only. Thank you. Thank you.
Just following up a bit further on the sitting fees proposal, the people who are likely to be on this advisory group, would they already be receiving salaries as part of a role in other Indigenous organisations funded by different levels of government?
Through the chair, Councillor Bray, we don't know who will be appointed. We're looking to go through that process to find out. So I wouldn't be able to answer that question.
What's the position with the chair at this stage? Is the chair a salaried officer of some description, or?
Not to my knowledge. Well, sorry, let me be clear here. I'm not aware of payment.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bray. Councillor Peat.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. I gather currently this sort of services are there, as you said, within our, and are currently absorbed by the budget, by I guess the project. Is that by the project that it's related to? Would that be right?
Through the chair, that's correct, Councillor Peat.
So, and please, I'm not quite sure where to find it, but currently within our budget lines, I gather we'd have lines that show clearly where the money's coming from and how much is allocated to things like the members of the assessment panel and the independent ARVIC members, etc. Will it be the same with this, that there'll be an individual line of the budget that will clearly be identified and transparent to all?
Through the chair, yes, we can do that, Councillor Peat, to make it clear.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Peat. Councillor Brown, question?
Yes, can I have attachment 3 sent to me tomorrow of this report?
Through the chair, Councillor Brown, there were only 2 attachments to the report.
The meeting record is provided as attachment 3 to the agenda report, page 2.
Whereabouts on page 2 are you referring?
Second paragraph, just above communication from the Ghana Nation received in 2016.
Sorry, we're still trying to find it. Are you referring to the council report or one of the attachments?
I'm talking about the report, page 2. Oh, attachment 2.
Page 2 of attachment 2. Page 2 of attachment 2.
Just above communication from the Ghana Nation received. It's the last page.
Yeah, this one here.
Oh.
Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Brown, we thought you were referring to the actual report and not the attachment.
Through the chair, yes, we can provide that to you. That was a meeting, just a record of the meeting that was held earlier in July.
So that I can
yeah,
read
no,
it.
yeah, absolutely, that's fine. We didn't want to provide a whole raft of too many attachments to this report, but absolutely can provide that to you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. There's no further speakers. Would you like to close debate, Mayor Thompson? Thank you.
Look, I think we all know that this is an extremely important thing that we need to do, is to engage properly with the traditional owners of the land that we occupy. With regards to the costings, as we've all heard, that's going to come back to us in the new year, and we can debate that then. Although I would sort of also suggest that what price would you put on consulting with the traditional owners of the land that we're so involved in representing. So I think if you did the quick sums in your head based on the numbers we've heard tonight, it's probably cheaper than putting a load of sand on a beach once a year. And I think if you weighed up the importance between those two activities, it's pretty clear what's going to come out on top. So look, I just encourage you all to, like I said, support this incredibly important step towards better engagement with our traditional owners, and look forward to seeing the details come through in the early new year.
Thanks, Mayor Thompson. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? That motion is carried. Thank you, members. Moving on, there are no questions on notice, motions on notice, petitions. Any urgent business? No urgent business. No confidential items. So I will close the meeting at 9:43, and thank you all for your participation.